Hi, my name's Nat Pike from Sonic Arts, and welcome to the Ableton Live 9 crash course. This course is going to be around 1 hour long and is designed for the complete beginner in both Ableton Live and also digital audio. I'm going to assume you know almost nothing on either of those two topics. However, if you have been using Ableton Live for some time and would like a deeper understanding of the software, this video could be helpful for you as well. So I'm going to jump straight in and show you how to install Ableton Live. Okay, I've opened up my web browser and I've gone to ableton.com. Now, if you don't own the Ableton Live software, you can get a fully functioning 30-day trial, which means you can save your songs and export them by going to ableton.com and clicking the Try Live for free. That'll take you to the downloads section. Now, I own the software, so this is my user account here, and I can choose which version of the software to download. Now, I am on a Mac, but all of the concepts that I'm telling you today will also work for PC. There'll just be some small differences in some of the keyboard shortcuts and actually how the operations take place. But you can see there's two versions of the software here, 32-bit and 64-bit. If you don't know which version to install, just install the 64-bit. That means you can utilize all of the RAM on your computer. The only reason you would want to install the 32-bit is if you only had a 32-bit operating system, or if you had some 32-bit plugins, some old legacy plugins that you wanted to use in Ableton Live. But that can only use up to a maximum of 4 GB of RAM. So if you've got more than 4 GB of RAM, definitely install the 64-bit. Now, I've downloaded this already, so I'm going to click on the installer from the downloads bar here. And if you've downloaded it in a different browser, you just have to go and find where you may have downloaded that to and double click on that. So this is going to go and install Ableton Live on my computer. Now, the latest version as of this video is 9.7.1, and this is going to take a few minutes to install, so I'll join back with you in just a moment. Okay, you can see that it's now brought up an installer window, and all I have to do is click and hold on that icon and drag it into this applications window, and that's going to create the full installation of the software. This is also going to take a few more minutes, so I'll join back with you as soon as it's completed. Okay, now Ableton Live 9 is installed on the computer. We can access it by going to our Applications folder, and there it is right up the top, Ableton Live 9 Suite, and if you want you can pop it in the dock as well, and just click once on that. It's going to open up live for me. Now, this is the default screen that you're greeted with every time you open up Ableton Live 9. And there are a few things you can do to optimize the audio or to even set up the audio if you haven't done so. I have an audio interface connected to the computer, and we can see by going to Live and Preferences, we would want to click on this Audio tab here if it's not already selected. And this is where you select the device that you would like to use Ableton Live 9 with. You can either have if you don't have an external device, if you don't have an interface, you can simply select built-in input and built-in output, which will just use the onboard sound for the Mac. My particular interface that I'm using is a Fireface UCX. So you might have an M Audio or a Focusrite, Scarlett, or any number of interfaces. And the name of that interface will appear here. So you want to have your interface selected, and we want to have a look at this buffer size here. Buffer size is very important. It will affect how the performance of Ableton Live. If you're doing only mixing and you're using a lot of samples and a lot of VST instruments, virtual instruments, you want to have a higher buffer size. But with higher buffer sizes comes more latency, which means that if you have a microphone plugged in to your interface and you have a high buffer size, there will be audible latency between when you speak and when you hear what you're saying, and it can be very confusing. It's kind of like an annoying echo. So a good setting, if you have a reasonably fast computer, I like to use 128 samples. That works fine on this computer. Depending on how fast your processor and how much RAM you have, you can experiment with these. 128 is a good starting point. The other important thing is to select the in and out sample rate. As a minimum, I would suggest using 44.1, and as a higher quality, you can select 48,000 hertz, which is 48 kilohertz. So I'm going to keep that on 48 kilohertz, and that's about all the basic optimizing you really need to do with Live when you've installed it. And now I just want to show you some of the workspaces. So there are two main workspaces in Ableton Live, and a workspace is just a way of saying a screen for doing work in. And as a default, we're looking at the session view, and this is also called the clip view. If I hit tab, it will take me over to the arrangement view. And an alternate to hitting tab is up on the right hand corner. You can click with your mouse. Arrangement view, session view. Over on our left we have the browser, which is a very important area. That contains all of the third-party plugins that you may have installed, all of the native Ableton Live 9 effects and samples, packs that you may have purchased or downloaded for free from Ableton Live, ableton.com rather. And each area up the top here does something slightly different. So this sounds category will give you quick access to any Ableton Live native instruments or packs that you've downloaded. And when the arrow is pointing sideways, you just get the category. But if you click on this little arrow here, it will expand and show you all the instruments available. So if you're just quickly looking for a piano sound or something like that, you can just click on the piano area and it will actually play you a little audition of that sound. If it doesn't make a sound for some reason, you need to engage this little blue set of headphones down here. That's the preview button there. Next category are the drum kits, and these are kits and certain things that you've installed with Ableton Live, and you can double click on one of those to load it up on a new track, or you can just click on it to listen to it. The next, I'm just going to go and delete that track there. Under instruments, you have all of the Ableton Live 9 instruments that you've installed. The standard version of Ableton Live has a smaller list of these. The suite has a full set of virtual instruments. You have some analog synthesizer, analog modeled synthesizer. You have Operator, which is a fantastic synth, really good for making bass lines. And then when you open up that, it shows you the presets. So if I just want to load up a quick preset from Operator, I'll choose a bass sound, expand that. You can just double click on that preset, it'll create a new track for you, and you're ready to go. I'm just using my computer keyboard here. And to be able to hear the virtual instrument on a track, you need the record enable button. If that wasn't on and I was trying to play, I wouldn't hear anything. So put that record enable on. Now I can hear that. In just a moment, we'll go over the different track types and we'll tell you about all of those. Next are the audio effects. So these are all of your traditional effects like reverb and delay, equalizers. Ableton Live has an incredibly large range of native plugins, very high quality as well. So if we wanted to put some reverb on a track, we can download a preset. We can use a preset, or we can simply just drag this entire device onto a track, and it will load up a fresh reverb, and we can actually go in and change all the parameters. So if you select across the top here and hit delete, that will get rid of that. This little area down the bottom is very handy because whatever track you have selected, it will show you any instruments, samples, or effects that you have loaded up on that track. So if I have a number of effects on this track, they will only show up when I click that track. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete these. Next we have MIDI Effects. These effects that you can only use on MIDI tracks. Max for Live is included with the Suite version, or if you've purchased it separately, that's more of an advanced feature, so we're not going to cover that in this session today. Now here in plugins, you can access any third-party plugins that you have installed, such as I've got some Native Instruments and the Waves suite installed on this particular computer, and Melodyne, which is an auto-tuning piece of software. So any third-party plugins that you have installed are accessible from there. And if you've installed a plugin and you can't see it on that list, you just need to go to the Preferences, and under the File and Folder area, you have to make sure that Use Audio Units and Use VST plugins, they're all selected as on. And if you've installed a new plugin and you want to include it in your Ableton Live session, you can hit the rescan and it will rescan those plugin folders. Next we have clips. That's just a collection of all the clips that you have installed, and samples. It's just like a bucket full of all the samples that you currently have in your Ableton Live folder, depending on how many packs you've installed. And also here, packs. These are Ableton Live packs that you can download from the website. And I've downloaded a couple of these packs. Suite, if you've purchased the Suite version or downloaded the Suite version, they give you a lot of these packs for free. So you can click download and you simply click on that .alp file when it downloads, and that will install it into Ableton Live. So if I've downloaded this break selection, which is some break beats, and I've just clicked on that, and now it's installing that pack into Ableton Live 9. Nice and quick. And it will tell me a little bit about that pack that I've just installed. And there are many packs that you can purchase, and a lot are included with the Suite version. So here are all the packs that I currently have installed, and there it is, Break Selection by Sample Magic. And I can have a look in there and see if there are some samples, some clips, vintage breaks. So we can have a quick listen to what we've installed there. And down here you can include any folders that you may have full of samples or whatever you want. So if I actually created a folder on my desktop and I had some drum samples in there, drum samples, I can then go ahead and click Add Folder, Desktop, Drum Samples. And then I can access all of those samples. If I had any in that folder, they would all appear here, and I could simply use them in Live. Now I'd like to show you a little bit about tracks. And a track is, this is a track here, this is another track, and as a default, Ableton Live will create a number of tracks for you at the start of each session, and a track is simply a place where one sound or one instrument is held. And so if you say recorded a guitarist and a vocalist and you had some electronic drums, you could have the drums on one track, the vocals on one track, and the guitar on another. So we have 2 MIDI tracks, 2 audio tracks, 2 return tracks, which are for audio effects, and a master track, which is also known as a master channel. The term track and channel can be used interchangeably. And when I'm in, this is currently the arrange view, but if I go over to the clip view, you'll notice that I have the same amount of tracks. These are actually exactly the same tracks. We're just viewing them a different way. So if I select this track, it will be the corresponding track. It's the same thing. So what is the difference between an audio track and a MIDI track? An audio track will hold digital audio, which means that it's a audio file stored somewhere on your computer, and this would be used if you were recording some vocals, or if you had an external instrument that you've plugged into an audio interface. And you can see that there's a level coming in, which is me talking on this little section here. And if I wanted to record some audio into live, I would simply plug a microphone into my audio interface, and I would select which input. So I currently have 2 inputs selected as active. Input 1 is where my mic is plugged into, and I record arm the track by hitting this button here, and then I simply hit record up here. And you can see that I'm recording audio, which is going through the interface, which contains an analog to digital converter. It's converting the analog acoustic energy into a voltage, which is then being converted into digital ones and zeros, into bytes. So that is an audio file now, and that's actually sitting somewhere on my hard drive. I can right click on that and go show in Finder, and that will take me to where that audio file is actually sitting on the hard drive. Now, a MIDI track is slightly different. So at the start of, when you start a blank session, they'll give you 2 audio tracks and 2 MIDI tracks. A MIDI track is predominantly used for a virtual instrument, and it doesn't hold audio, it holds information, note information, musical performance information that will trigger the sounds on a virtual instrument. So the way we would use a MIDI track would be if we had an external keyboard, a MIDI keyboard, or any other MIDI instrument device that you use to perform MIDI data in, and you will not get any sound out of a MIDI track unless there is a virtual instrument on it. So I'm going to select one of these virtual instruments from the instrument rack here, which comes with every version of Live. Just go into the piano and key area. So I'm going to just drag this onto that MIDI track. Now, if you want to create your own track, you can right click in this grey area where there are no tracks, and you can insert audio, MIDI, or return track. The other way to do it is by going create, insert audio track, insert MIDI track. So I'm going to right click here, insert MIDI track, and I'm going to drag that instrument on to that MIDI track, and you'll see it's renamed the track. I can rename it by right clicking and select rename or Command R. So electric piano. Now that I have a virtual instrument loaded up, I need to make sure that that track is record armed so I can hear it, and now I can use a MIDI controller to trigger this instrument. So I'm just actually using my computer keyboard, and if you have this little selection up here, a little keyboard, it will enable you to use your computer keyboard as if it were an external piano MIDI instrument or something like that. And all that's happening when I hit, let's say I had a keyboard set up and I hit middle C, it would send MIDI data, which MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And it's just a way of it's a way of external controllers communicating with sound units, virtual instruments, to trigger those sounds that are in them. So when I hit a C note, it'll send MIDI data via the MIDI cable saying, play the note C for 2 seconds So it has a note on and a note off piece of information that gets sent. And then it will say play it at this velocity, which is how hard I hit my finger down on the keyboard. There are actually a lot more types of MIDI controller data, but the most common ones are note on and note off, which is when you hit the keyboard and take your finger off the key, velocity, and which note you're actually playing, whether it's a C, a D, an F sharp. So I'm going to record some MIDI data here I have my track armed. I'm just going to hit record. So you can see every time I'm hitting my keyboard, it's recorded a piece of MIDI data. Now I've just double clicked on this clip, which is what these are called here, clips. That's a clip of audio and that's a clip of MIDI. And if I want to zoom in any area of live, I simply take the mouse pointer and go up to the ruler area up the top here, same as down here, until it turns into a little magnifying glass. And if I click and hold and move up and down, it will zoom horizontally. And if I did that down on this piano roll, which is opened up from double clicking on the clip, I can do that vertically as well. That's very important in live. You might have a song that's 5 minutes long and you need to zoom in very close to a section to edit it, and you can see the clip here. This MIDI clip contains this MIDI data, and I can edit this MIDI data if I want to. So you can see here, if I click on it, I can't hear anything because I need these headphones selected to do that. So that is a single MIDI note, and it's an E. It's E3. I can change that note by grabbing it, dragging it up and down. I can change the length by hovering over the side until it turns into a bracket. And I can change the velocity with this little slider down here. That's, for all intents and purposes, velocity is how hard you hit the note, and it relates to mainly volume. There is a little bit more to it than that. There are some other factors with MIDI, like if you've got a sustain pedal, and that's some more advanced sort of stuff. We can look at that in a different course, but we can play back my performance here. So I can change that note by dragging it up. All I'm doing is hitting the space bar here to play that and to stop it. You can also hit the little play button there. And you'll notice down here that we sort of have this grid, and that these notes kind of snap onto that grid, which is very, very helpful if we're using a click track. So to turn the click track on, or the metronome, we can hit this little one here. And up here it will tell you the time signature. 4/4 is the most common one. You don't really have to know what many of these other things do, apart from the tempo is very handy as well. So we've got 120 beats per minute, and you can just click on that once and type in a different value, or you can click and hold that and go up and down and it will change that value. So let's have a listen to this. So if I want that to conform to 107 beats a minute, which is just what I've got, or let's make it 110, we can snap it onto the grid here. And to change the resolution of that grid, you simply right click in any area, and we can see here these are the grid options. So we can have the grid off, which means the notes will just slide around completely freely. We can have it set to 1 bar. We can have it set to 16th notes. I'm going to select 16th notes. And let's see if I can snap that onto the grid. I can select a lot of notes by dragging a box around them. So you can set slightly out of time. This is just some really basic MIDI editing. Okay, so I've edited that MIDI there, and I can collapse this view with this little arrow down here. The clips can also be edited in this view by grabbing the edges, and we can do things like grab it on the top and move it in time. And we are snapped onto that grid there at the moment, so I can just make that grid. I'll just right click in the grey area and select one bar, and that will snap on to the start of each bar, and you can see the bar numbers up the top here. So what I can do with this clip is I can grab it by the colourful top piece and move it side to side by clicking and holding. I can copy and paste, Command C, Command V, or I can right click on it and get all these options. Cut, copy, paste, duplicate will make a copy of it right next to it, and I can get two clips, and if I hold the Shift key down it will select both of them. I can even consolidate them. There are all sorts of things I can do. I can change the color of that clip. And there we go. So we've successfully recorded some audio, which was me talking, and you can see and we've successfully recorded some MIDI data. I would like to show you about the effects tracks and how we can use audio effects in Ableton Live, and the best way to display how to use the basic functions of Ableton Live is to make a very quick track so you can follow along with me. This will be extremely quick. So I'm going to delete all of these tracks by just selecting them, holding down the Shift button and selecting delete. So let's just make a very quick composition. I'm going to have my electric piano there, and I'm going to find just a nice drum loop from the packs that I've downloaded. Let's have a look here. So I'm going to create an audio track, and I'm just going to drag that loop in. Now it says here it's 100 beats a minute, and Ableton Live will actually warp the audio to be in time with whatever beats per minute. Whatever beats per minute we have selected here. That's one of the great features of Ableton Live, is that it warps audio. So if I change the beats per minute of the entire song, any warped audio will also change speed. So I've got my audio clip there. I'm going to duplicate that by hitting Command D. Now I'm going to record some electric piano. So I've recorded that MIDI just by playing my computer keyboard. Now I'm going to Command D and duplicate that as well. Now I think I'd like a bass line, so I'm going to show you another way you can create MIDI. So I'm going to first find a virtual instrument from over on the left hand side. I'm going to select the operator. I'm going to expand this to find a bass preset. That one sounds fine. I'm going to click and drag that into an area where there are no tracks, and it's going to create a new MIDI track with that virtual instrument on it. And what I can do is select a region here and right click and go insert MIDI clip, and that will create a blank MIDI clip. If I double click on that, I can now draw the notes in. So to be able to hear what I'm drawing in, I need to have these headphones selected. So this is a bass, we need to go lower. Okay, we're in E. So if I double click in an empty spot there on the MIDI editor, it'll create a MIDI note. I can also draw notes in by selecting the draw tool up on the top right hand corner. That'll draw a note. The length of the note will be whatever I have the grid set to. So if currently I have an adaptive grid, which means it'll actually change the grid size depending on how zoomed in I am. But let's see if I can make 16th, maybe eighth notes, which are quavers. So I'm going to draw in a bass line. Okay, so I've just drawn in some notes. Some of them I don't want, so I'm going to select them and hit the delete button. And then let's just use our ears here. That'll do. Very ghetto. And then I'm going to change the length of that clip just by grabbing the edge and hitting Command D. So now we have a very simple little composition here. Let's just have a listen to it's repeating every 4 bars. And I can double click on any of the tracks and it will show me down the bottom what is loaded up on them. Now I haven't named this one, so I should. Command R to rename, drum loop. Okay, now effects. We've got a whole lot of audio effects over on the left hand side. And what I want to do is I want to put some reverb on my electric piano. And one way we can do that is by simply grabbing a reverb, a preset. Let's open up the presets, Hall, Ballad, and just dragging it onto that track. And you can see down the bottom it's loaded up a reverb. Now because I have this little dry/wet, that basically means how much reverb do you want to put on that sound. I had that all the way up. It was way too much, so let's put a small amount on. Okay, now there's a couple of things I want to address right now. We're peaking on our master track. You can see there's red happening down there, which means everything is too loud. So we can change the volume of each track with this little orange slider. But there's a better view for doing this, which is the clip view, because we have a sort of a traditional mixing console view, and we can have a look. It's peaking a lot on that master bus there, so we just want to bring the volume of these tracks down. So this slider is the volume slider, and then you can do panning, so you can change it how far left and how right, and you can turn the track on and off by hitting this button, or you can solo a track by hitting the S, which means you'll only hear what's on that track. So that's a much better level. We're not peaking out over there. Now, what I've done by putting the reverb on that track is a very basic way of doing it, and it's actually not the best way. The best way to use effects in a digital audio workstation is to send some of that sound from that track through a return track which has the effect on it. And as a default, Ableton Live will give you one reverb return track and one delay track. And the amount of reverb and delay that you want on each sound can be altered with this little slider here. And all I'm doing is clicking in there and dragging up and down. And if I switch to the other view, it's a lot easier to use these knobs here called the send knobs. And all that's doing is sending some audio from the electric piano track over to the A return track here, which is a reverb. So let's have a listen. I can send it to some delay. And we can have as many return tracks as we want. I can create, insert return track. So there we go. I've made a new return track with nothing on it, which is now in the B area. I would have rather that been C, but doesn't matter. So I can actually put an effect on that return track, anything I want. So let's just pick something crazy like a chorus and put it on that track. Now the trick to putting an effect on a return track is it always has to be 100% wet, which means you're only hearing the effect and none of the original sound that you're sending to it. So I'm just going to hit tab now and change back to the other view. And let's send some of that electric piano to this end, to the return track rather. So you can hear that's a very subtle effect there, so I'll keep that on there. So that's basically how you use these return tracks and MIDI and audio tracks. Now I quickly would like to show you the clip view, which is also known as the session view. So I'm going to hit the tab button, the tab key, and now that we're over in this clip view, this is the live area of Ableton Live, and this is what you would be using if you were a DJ or a live electronic music performer, and if you were creating loop-based compositions, this is the best area to do it in. And so basically we've still got the same tracks as we had before, and each track in the arrange view we have these clips that sit on the track in linear in time. So you can see here it's in minutes and seconds. It's non-linear in the session view, which means, well, I'll show you how that works. So we'll just pick some samples to load up. I'll create some new tracks. I'll create an audio track here, and I'll find a nice loop. So I can drag that loop actually onto an empty clip slot. And just in the way that we had clips in there, we have clips now in slots in this area. So drum loop, and I can make another track. Actually, I want a MIDI track, and I'm going to actually take the clip from the other screen and drag it into that. Or I can drag one in, or I can record one in. So this is how you drag it in. I'm going to take the bass, click and hold on it, and then hit the tab button, and then I can drag that MIDI clip over here. And if I double click on that clip, we can't see it because we need to expand it. We've got the MIDI editor in this screen also. So currently there's no virtual instrument on that track. There's just this MIDI data. So these are the information to trigger an instrument, but there's nothing to trigger. So I'm just going to select a different bass sound. And drop it on that track. And to trigger a clip in this, you hit the little play button there. I'll just mute those other tracks here. If I double click on that clip, we can see that this clip is currently 4 bars long. So I actually can either duplicate these notes by hitting Command D, or I can right click and select duplicate, or I can actually just drag in these little markers and change the length of the loop. So the idea in the clip view is everything is a loop. And you'll see here, if I hit play, I've triggered it. Now I can hit this loop here. It's a bit loud. So we've got these clip slots here, and you can see that they loop. So this is actually a 2-bar loop. This is also a 2-bar loop because I've set the loop regions to make that loop. And we can have any number of loops and trigger them. We can trigger them via an external controller or just by clicking the play. I can even record a clip. So I can record enable this track. And if I want to record on this track here, a new clip, I just see how they no longer squares, they're circles. I click the circle. So I was just playing on my keyboard there, and I've actually created a new clip, and we can see here that that's 4 bars long. Now the trick with triggering these loops, they're always going to be in time because Ableton Live will actually wait until the start of the next bar before triggering it. So I can click at any time and it will wait until the start of the next bar. So everything's always in time. And I can put more samples in there if I would like. More loops. And I can copy and paste clips, Control C, Control V, and I can edit them. I'm going to make this go up 2 notes. Okay, so individually a clip can be triggered, but also all the way over here on the master track, if you hit this little arrow, that's called a scene, which is a row of clips. And I can go and trigger other loops here, and it will always wait till the start of the next bar. And I can actually make that longer than 1 bar by changing the lead in here. If I change that to 2 bars, it'll actually wait 2 bars before triggering that. So that's one of the fantastic features of Live, is that you can never, I guess, be out of time with yourself because it will always lock into that grid. And that's a little bit about the clip view. I've got some more videos that go into, it's also known as the session view. If you want to learn more about this area, it's a huge topic, so we can cover that another time in a more advanced video. Now I'm going to hit Tab and go back to my range view, and you'll see here everything's kind of grayed out because I was mucking around in the clip view. I actually, if I want to use this view again, I just have to click this little button here, which is the back to arrangement. And one of the final topics I'd like to tie off this video with is automation and how you can export a mix. So you see here there's some little red lines on each track, and these are the automation lines. And you can pretty much automate anything you want in Ableton Live. And some of the most simple things are the volume of a track or the panning of a track. And whatever is you can see written here in these little drop-down menus is what is currently being automated. So let's automate the volume of this drum loop. I'm going to select Mixer because that will automate anything to do with mixing. And I'm going to select Track Volume. Now this line represents the volume of the track. And if I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer by hovering up on the ruler and clicking and holding and dragging down. I'm also going to get rid of the browser by hitting that button. Now let me click on that line and it will create a breakpoint, a little node that I can alter you can see it more clearly if I click here. And all that does is it gives me a little point, and I can drag that up and down, and the higher that goes up, the louder the volume, and the lower that's minus infinity, which is no volume at all. So let's have these drums fading in and then fading out at the end. So let's hear what that sounds like. Oop, I have to enable these tracks because I disengaged them before. So we can hear that. And another simple automation technique you can do, I'm going to do to the electric piano, which is the mixer, and I'm going to automate the track panning, which is how much is in the left speaker and how much is in the right. So all the way to the top is right and all the way to the bottom is left. Let's hear what that sounds like. And you can automate any plugin that you've got on any track, any section, by simply right-clicking on anything on one of those virtual instruments. So let's say I want to change the brightness over time. I just simply right-click on the brightness knob on that instrument and go Show Automation. And now we can see up here on the electric piano, it's got the instrument there and the brightness. So let's make it really dull by taking it all the way down, and then really bright by taking it all the way up. And we'll see over time, there's a little red dot now near that brightness, that value will change down here. So automation is a really great way of getting some more complexity and making your mixes a lot more interesting. So those are some of the basic functions of Ableton Live. I hope that you've got enough to basically get going. And the final thing that we really need to cover is I've written a song, I've made this little beat. How do I export that? How do I get it out of Ableton Live so I can put it on SoundCloud or turn it into an MP3, show it to my friends? Very, very simple. So the simplest way of exporting a track is giving it a range. So I'm just going to click from here and drag the mouse. And now it has a range. It means that when I export the audio, it's going to start there and it's going to finish there. Another way I can do that a little bit more permanently is find this little ruler thing, I guess. You can see what anything is called by hovering over it, and it will show you in the bottom left hand corner if you don't know what something's called. So this is called the loop start / punch in point, and it also dictates the export range if you click on it. So I'm going to drag that there and drag that there and click on it now. So that's saying song starts there, song finishes there. And now I'm going to go File and select Export Audio or Video. And you select the parameters of what you would like the audio file to be. And by default, they have some pretty good settings, and I wouldn't really touch them. A WAV file, WAV, is uncompressed high quality audio, 44.1 kilohertz or 44,100 hertz. Sample rate is CD quality, Redbook audio, and 16-bit is also the same. You can change that to higher definition if you want. You can make it 48 kilohertz, 24-bit. You want to make sure that you don't have any of these selected. You don't want to convert to mono. You don't want to normalize. And for the moment, we don't need to worry about anything else. We just want to select export, and it will say, where would you like to save this? So I want to save it to the desktop and call it Jam1. Save, and now it's going to export that audio file to the desktop. The other thing that I have to do before we finish up for this video is save what I've done. Very simple. You go to the File menu and you go Save Live Set. And I'm going to save it to the desktop. And I'm going to call it Jam 1. Make sure you always save what you're doing. And if I have a look at my desktop now, I should see here now, there we go, Jam 1 project. And that's actually the project folder. There's my mix that I've bounced down. If I double click on that folder, it'll show me there's the session file. So if I want to open that session up again, I can double click on that. Then it's got any samples in there and some project information. And one other thing that's very, very handy to do, especially if you've used some samples, is to go File, Collect All, and Save. And that will, if you have all of those ticked, it will save any audio files that you've got. So next time you open it up, you won't have any missing files. So I hope you've enjoyed the crash course in Ableton Live, and that you've got some tools to start creating your own music. And do stay tuned for more Sonic Arts videos, and we're going to have some more advanced courses coming out soon, and also some other courses in other pieces of software. So happy music creating. Cheers.